Hi, brothers and sisters. I thought I'd share, I think it'll be a short video. It might end up being a long video. But a few things that the Spirit has been sharing with me of late. And also wanted to say that I did make some mistakes on my last video. I said daughters when I meant son. And there was a few places that my mouth was running ahead of my brain and not listening to my brain, which it does sometimes. So hopefully you can fill in where I made those blunders. So today, I thought we'd actually talk about the Antichrist and the Old Covenant. And I meant to look the verse that I was looking for, that I was actually thinking of to put in this video. And it's in the book of Daniel. When it states he's going to reestablish the Old Covenant, right? So just, sorry, this was a spur of the moment thing. I didn't actually plan on doing it, and this seems to be the way the Spirit works with me. I'll be sitting in my chair studying 1 minute. I'm too far in there. And the next minute she's saying, all right, get up out of your chair and make video. And I'm like, am I really prepared for it? And most of the time, I must confess, I'm really not. But that's what the Spirit leads me to do. So, am I going to be able to find that? Okay. Well, let's just look at what I've been shown. So, we're told that when the Antichrist comes on scene, right, or how we tend to understand it, is that he's going to establish the Old Covenant, right, with Israel. Well, what was the Old Covenant? Once we understand this, what was the Old Covenant? Well, the Old Covenant was in effect during the dispensation of the law. So what is that saying? Well, it's saying your Old Covenant is Old Testament law, basically. That's what it's saying. And what have we been coming to understand about Old Testament law the more we study it and dig into it? Well, the more we understand Old Testament law is that it was written by the hands of men that were led by the Holy Spirit that they were in covenant with. So what actually is it saying that this Old Covenant is? This Old Covenant is the Old Covenant that was established between fallen Adam and the Holy Spirit that said, I'll exalt you as God in the earth, and I'll be exalted on Mount Zion. That's, of course, we're looking at the second heaven spiritual here. Because your principality of the power of the air is the Holy Spirit that man exalts. So when this Antichrist comes on scene, what it looks like he puts in play is Old Testament law. Which does what? And we've been discussing this from the feminine perspective for a change instead of the masculine. What does Old Testament law tend to do? It tends to subjugate women under men. And what does that Antichrist do? He walks himself in the temple and says he's God. We've been talking about that false Baal image. That Baal image that promotes men as gods in the earth. We see that in Daniel chapter 2. You're looking at a false image. It's a kingly image. And we understand where we get that idea of a Baal being your husband, not only referenced in verses that you find in Genesis 49, 22 or 23, where it says, and the archers shoot at these branches, these daughters, as they try to pass through the wall. And we come to understand how those righteous daughters are your key of David, your key. And then you understand that they are the remnant of Israel. And they're also spoken of in Romans 11. Let's look at that right quick. Romans 11, it says, let me see here if I can find it. For, this is verse 15 of Romans 11. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, that's these daughters of Zion, that was cast out in the fields of the Gentiles. And we discussed how they're also, daughter Zion is the one that's in view in Isaiah 49, and that this is her birthright made much larger. And so here we have a reference to these daughters that were cast out in the fields of the Gentiles in Romans 11:15 as your first fruits. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? Because it is your daughters of Zion, your righteous daughters of Zion, your key of David that gives life to the body. So that's what we're looking at, and we've been looking at. So what does this false image we find referenced as your husband, your Lord, and your master, which is your name Baal, which is archer in Genesis 49:22 or 23. The archers have sorely grieved him by shooting at him. It's her, the daughters of Zion, the righteous daughters. And that word there is 1167, which is derived from 1168, which is Baal. Both of them are Baal. One's a capital B and one's a small b. And so the small b, 1167, is your archers there, which is your husband, which is your Lord and Master. And in Hosea 2, we're told, Mother says, I'll remove the name Baal out of your mouth. You will no longer call your husband Lord and Master, because he is not your Lord and your Master. He never was. And you see, but that's what the Antichrist is. The Antichrist is the fallen Adam who wanted to be God. And so he made a covenant with this whore spirit, Lucifer. You have two women in view representing two covenants in Galatians 4, and we're going to keep hitting on this until it finally sinks into our heads. That it's referencing a covenant with a whore spirit and a covenant with a righteous spirit. All right? And Adam rejected a covenant with the righteous spirit. And she says, I'll lift you up as a God in the earth. You'll be the God in the earth. And so here we have the Antichrist walking into the temple, establishing himself as God. Well, God, really, in this case, when you get studying it, her name was Daughter Zion. She sat in the Holy of Holies. The temple, the body, and the spirit is male and female. That's why this is an abomination to God. It is rightfully the daughter of Zion's place to sit, not no man's. And that's why it's called such an abomination. He's establishing Old Testament law to try to subjugate these righteous daughters again. And that's what we're looking at. That comes to be our understanding. Now, I'm just glossing it over, all right? We could go in much greater depth than what I've done here. But you know what? I found them referenced in Micah 5, 7, and 8. And we're going to look at that, okay? Because, excuse me, in the last video, we came to understand that you're going to trace the 10 northern tribes of Israel through the daughters' lineage. You're not going to trace it through any sons. You're going to trace it through the daughters, because that's how Israel was promised, right? And we understood how Israel represented Eve's seed, and how all the surrounding Gentile nations referenced Adam and the whore spirit seed, okay? That's what we come to understand. And so when Israel rejected these righteous daughters of Zion, they were cast out into the fields of the Gentiles. And we saw in Isaiah 49 how that actually leads to a much greater mantle, a birthright, right? This mantle being the body, all right? So her mantle becomes much greater. She claims not only Israel, but then she gets to claim the Gentiles because of this casting off, which is what we just read in Romans 11. So if the casting off of them, right? And you see, I left it again. What does it say? For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be? But life from the dead. And you see, we know that Christ came to claim this key. He becomes the new mantle that she claims her birthright through. This is what Christ represents. And he, in effect, puts the new covenant in effect when she's ready to be manifested in the earth. All right? So his death allows this new covenant to exist. Okay? And so these daughters of Zion are getting ready to manifest in the earth because they're getting ready to take on the Antichrist. Sort of. I guess that's how we're going to look at it. But let's look at Micah chapter 5. And for anybody who's been studying the daughters of Zion, Micah is an excellent book to understand who the daughter of Zion is. And she's found as the descendant. Just a second here. I'm in the wrong chapter. Excuse me. All right. She's the descendant that you find in Micah chapter 5. And it was through that word, let's read it. Let's read 5 verse 1 and 2 of Micah. Chapter 5 verse 1 and 2. Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. This is daughter Zion. He hath laid a siege against us, or she, the whore spirit, Lucifer, has laid a siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. Verse 2, but thou, Bethlehem Ephratah. Now that's a funny phrase right there. Bethlehem, we know, is the birthplace of Christ, right? But Ephratah is a reference to Ephraim, which is a strange reference. It's like the scepter will not depart from between the feet of Judah until Shiloh comes. Well, Shiloh is in the territory of Ephraim. So it's showing you who the real ruler is. It's the daughter Zion. The scepter belongs to her. That's what that is telling you. Once you understand and can put all of this information together. So the Old Testament law that's going to be established by the Antichrist is to try to stop these daughters of Zion from manifesting in the earth. So verse 2, we'll go back here. Verse 2, but thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall she, not he, this is daughter Zion that's coming forth, shall she come forth unto me, that is to be ruler in Israel, whose going forths, that's the word you want to look up, I believe, whose going forths have been from of old, from everlasting. Now, we talked about in the last video how when these daughters of Zion was cast out into the fields of the Gentiles, she then begins to claim the Gentiles, right? Because your lineage of the Israelites was claimed through the woman's side, not claimed through the man, all right? So these daughters pick up the Gentiles as they go. So they enlarge their birthright as they go, is basically what they're doing. And I was going to go on something there, and I forget that quick what it was. So your descendant and your ruler is daughter Zion. And when you look that word up there, whose going forth has been of old, it's going to say feminine. It's a descendant. It'll say descendant, but it's a feminine noun. And it's daughter Zion. It says the first dominion will come back to her. That's what it says. I can't remember what chapter, but if you read the book of Micah, your eyes will open greatly. And then we come to understand how they are the remnant, the glory. That these daughters who actually rise up out of the Gentiles, these 10 northern tribes. And it's interesting that there's 10 and that there's 10 toes on that false image of Baal. I find that very fascinating. 10 and 10. Really fascinating. But let's look at what Micah 5 says. Micah 5, verse 7. And the remnant of Israel shall be in the midst of many people as a dew. Now, dew is your doctrine of heaven. So we are looking at law again, but we're looking at the law of heaven versus the law of the old covenant, which was between fallen Adam and that whore spirit, which was made to exalt man as God on the earth. Which is what you see. That's an abomination. All right? A male inside of a male. He's trying to claim he's God. That position belongs to the daughter of Zion. It always has. Micah tells you this. Shall be in the midst of many people as a dew. So what's the dew? Well, if you go to Deuteronomy 32, Deuteronomy chapter 32, yeah, it's verse 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy. I've got two other ones right here in reference to wormwood. we'll look at that too, maybe briefly. I don't want this to be very long. Okay, so in Deuteronomy 32, we get our reference to what the dew is. What does it say? Okay, verse 1, give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Verse 2, my doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. So we're told here, my doctrine, the words of heaven, which is likened to the rain, and her speech as the dew. So what does it say here of the remnant? Micah 5:7. And the remnant of Israel shall be in the midst of many people as a dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men. Verse 8, and the remnant of Israel. It says Jacob, but Jacob, they want you to focus on masculinity by saying Jacob. Israel, if you look at the derivative of the name Israel, and I said this last time, it's from Sarah El. And they're trying to say it's not directly from Sarah. It's a different word there. Well, Sarah means to wrestle also, and I forgot to say that in my last video. And El is God. And so the name of Israel is God wrestles. And we identified the daughters of Zion as God's strong right arm. Well, you wrestle with your arm, don't you? So those descendants is clearly pointed as coming from Sarah, and Sarah come from Eve. It's a direct line, right? And they actually descend from Mother Yahweh, the Spirit in heaven, who gives life to all things, which were cast off in the beginning for the spirit of death. What does it say? Her steps leads down to the gates of Sheol. That's what it says in Proverbs 9. And it speaks of the honey on her lips. And then it speaks of how, it tastes like honey in his mouth in the book of Job. These words, these lies, this false doctrine, the old covenant law, how it tastes like honey on his tongue, but it's cobra's venom in his stomach. It's killing him. And he don't even know it. Or maybe he does, and he doesn't care. I don't know. What does it say? Verse 8, again. And the remnant of Israel, not Jacob, shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people. They're among the Gentiles in the midst of many people. It says a line. No, these are female. You're only going to claim your heritage to Israel through the daughters. We know this to be true. Do a little study, you'll know it. Shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people as a lioness among the beasts of the force, as a young lioness among the flocks of sheep, who, if she go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. So, you see what we're looking at. We could go on because that's very interesting. And I'm sorry this is such a mucked up video, but what does it say in let me see here. It's in Psalms 9. Psalm 9 verse 14 says this, that I may show forth all thy praises in the gates of the daughter of Zion. I will rejoice in thy salvation. Well, that word for salvation is 3444, and that's a feminine Yeshua. You go look that up. But we're going to find a connection to that verse in Psalms 9:14. Sorry, I'm all over the board on this. Like I said, I wasn't really prepared to do this video. So hopefully you will be able to follow a little bit of what I'm saying. Psalm 24:9 says this, lift up your heads, O ye gates. What gates? Well, we just referenced them in Psalm 9:14. The gates of the daughter of Zion. So who do the gates belong to? The daughters of Zion. That's who. Psalm 24:9. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors. And the queen, not the king, the queen of glory shall come in unto thee, or shall come in. Verse 10. Who is this queen of glory? The Lord of hosts. She is the queen of glory. What's your host? What's your birthright? It's your children, right? That's what we're looking at. Now, I have studied the Azazel goat, right? And we've proven, the Spirit has proven to me beyond a shadow of doubt, the Azazel goat, and I believe it's Leviticus 16 or 17. I can never keep them two chapters straight. But they want to put two he-goats. No, there's one he-goat and one she-goat. And the he-goat has to die because he allowed the sin in. He's the one that actually made the covenant with the Holy Spirit. But the she-goat becomes the scapegoat for the whole thing. The righteous spirit got cast off and became the one that got blamed for it all. Eve took the blame. Well, she was set out, and she represented actually the nation of Israel being set apart. That's what we begin to understand. And so she's scapegoated. And the spirit that in the beginning inhabited these righteous daughters gets actually cast out. She was pierced. She was pierced to the point, it says, I believe in Psalms 50, that she couldn't even open her mouth. She couldn't even respond to the accusations made by fallen Adam and that Holy Spirit that he had chosen over her. And she was in such shock, it appears, by what he did to her, that she couldn't even respond in her own defense. That's what it acts like. Until now. We're presenting our case now. We're figuring it out. In the Spirit, it says, not by might nor by power do I do these things. I do them by the Spirit, and that is the daughters of Zion. Which is the second half of this covenant manifesting. All right? So it's getting ready to take full effect. This covenant is. It's actually not in view right now in the sense of the laws. And I wrote down a whole bunch of verses. And once I do a more in-depth study myself on all of this information, I'd like to put together a much more thorough video on things for you. But I was looking at, like I said, that Azazel goat. And I found a verse in Psalm 68:19. And I believe that was where we found the mighty army of the daughter of Zion that I speak of in one of my videos, which was called Daughter Zion, Strong Right Arm of God, Called God, according to Scripture. So let's go to Psalm 68, because I believe that was the chapter we found it in. Okay. So Psalm 68. Okay. And was that the chapter? I believe it was. No, maybe it was 69. No. I think it was 68. Yeah. Yeah, it was. So I was in the right chapter here. But in Psalm 68, verse 19, it sounds very much like the Azazel goat that we found in Leviticus, the female, the spirit that was blamed. And what did we come to learn about the Azazel goat? Well, the high priest put his hands on the head of this she-goat, and it was a she-goat, and pronounced all the sins of Israel upon her head. She took the blame. She was scapegoated for it. Now, what do we read in Psalm 68, verse 19? Watch what it says. It says, blessed be the Lord. That's 136 there. And we identified her as Daughter Zion, who sits to the right hand of Christ in Psalm 110. Okay? Who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. Okay, well, maybe I got the wrong verse. Well, I got that wrote down. Yeah. Do I have that right down right? Okay. Let's read it from here, because maybe I do have it the wrong chapter. Just give me 1 second here, folks. No, it's rendered differently. That's funny. See, I must have noticed it when I did my study. But watch what it says in other renderings here in Psalm 68 verse 19. Praise be to the Lord, that's 136, to God our Savior, who daily bears our burdens. See, we're seeing the Azazel goat there. That's what we're seeing. Verse 20, our God is a God of deliverance. The Lord God is our rescuer from death. So we talked about this as well. It is the Spirit that births you. You are caused to be reborn through the Spirit. So if this covenant is not in full effect just yet, because the Spirit has to manifest in the earth in order for that to be so, and I'm kind of thinking about this as I go, then we're waiting for these daughters to manifest. And so here's what I was thinking just this morning, and I'll share it with you. And I ain't saying I'm right, I'm probably wrong about this, but it sure seems to link to Isaiah 49 and among other things that I've said on this video, that these daughters who were cast out into the fields of the Gentiles to enlarge her birthright, actually originally descends from the original daughters of Zion. And the way I was supposing it to be, and I was just supposing, okay, is that because our genetics links us to those original daughters of Zion, we actually get to, in a sense, claim that spirit, that portion of spirit into these bodies. It's going to resurrect us to newness of life. But because our genetic encoding identifies us as originating from these original daughters of Zion, though we be Gentile, you see how it works with Isaiah 49. You'll have to watch my last video if you didn't. But you see, now we have the genetic, inheritance in us, and so we have a right to claim this portion of the Spirit as a daughter of Zion. I'm not saying it necessarily right, and because we choose the mantle of Christ, because we choose to receive Christ's death on the cross. He's our new Adam. He's our new body, right? And so when we receive that new mantle, because we originate from the original daughters of Zion, because you claim your lineage through the daughters in Israel, and that's why she's always saying, Israel's mine, Israel's mine, Israel's mine. Because by the Spirit claiming Israel, she claims everything. All right, that's her connection there. So I was just thinking about that, that could be why we can claim this portion of the Spirit, right, as the daughters of Zion, because we're actually holding genetic inheritance that traces our lineage through a long line of daughters from the original daughters of Zion. So I just thought I'd share that with you. And I don't know. I'm going to go in. I'm actually going to watch this video because it's probably pretty messed up. And I probably missed my line of thinking on some of the stuff. But I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to share with you. I've had so much come up lately that just wowed me. Let's look at Psalm 71:17 right quick. Okay? Since my youth, it says, and the word there is 5271, and it's feminine. God, you have taught me, and to this day declare your marvelous deeds. Well, I was fascinated because that word youth there is a feminine. And it seems like it's addressing a daughter there. Because you can punch in where it's derived from, and it's derived from a masculine, which is the boy and his youth, and well, why wouldn't the feminine be a daughter? Since my youth, God, as daughter Zion. So again, it comes back to this idea that the physical and the spirit is going to come together, right? And that spirit's going to remake this body, right? Christ's body wasn't left in the grave after he was resurrected. There was no body. So the Spirit completely resurrected and remade his body. And that's what our claim to the Spirit does for each one of us. So I wanted to share that with you. I hope I made sense. I apologize if I didn't. So take care, and may God bless each and every one of you.